Hey everybody, so for lesson 2 we want to keep talking about how America builds its empire and what is it that America does that really lets us call ourselves an empire. Remember we talked yesterday about how we started to gain influence over places like Japan and Hawaii, and we want to expand our conversation today to talk about how America ends up having protectorates and colonies and territories all across the globe. And our story is going to start with Cuba, little tiny island of Cuba. And the question is, well, why would we want to start our conversation about becoming an empire today with Cuba? And the answer there is really there's three things. One, they send a bunch of stuff to the United States. They export a lot to us. Number two, a lot of the United States investment by other companies is in Cuba, whether it's in sugar or mines for iron or coal, or whether that's railroads that companies have built in Cuba. And on top of that, there's a geographic reason for this, right? If we were to look at a map, we'll see that Cuba is very close to the United States. In fact, it's only 90 miles away. So America really does have a pretty strong interest in terms of what happens inside Cuba. And what we need to understand is that we're not the only people that are nearby when it comes to this region of the world. Spain has a tremendous presence right near America. Spain has colonies and protectorates in this region of the world. Puerto Rico belongs to Spain. The Dominican Republic belongs to Spain. Cuba itself is a protectorate, a colony, I should say, of Spain. So we have right off our coast, 90 miles away, a Spanish colony that we have really close economic ties to. However, the people of Cuba themselves weren't necessarily very happy. In fact, they were really upset with the way that Spain was treating them. The way you'll see people kind of explain this is that the Spanish were terribly cruel and did not understand the best ways to govern the Cuban people, and the Cuban people themselves wanted freedom. So they rebel. They choose to fight. And what we see in America are newspapers all across the country, especially in big cities, practicing something called yellow journalism. This is, it's an idea we still see today, first of all. And you exaggerate, or you create, you lie, you invent stories to try and get people to read your newspapers. And when these newspaper owners saw this rebellion going on right offshore where a ton of American businesses have companies, they figured this would be a great way for them to sell newspapers. So they start really exaggerating some of the ways that the Spanish are treating the Cubans during this rebellion. And this anger at Spain and this fear about what will happen to all of our business in Cuba kind of grows, so that we actually send a battleship down to Havana Harbor in Cuba to protect Americans that are there and to protect American business interests. And the crazy thing is that, so now we have this Spanish colony, Cuba, which is rebelling against Spain, it wants freedom. We do a lot of business there. We've got a battleship there. And then all of a sudden, in February 15th of 1898, the battleship USS Maine explodes. Now, nobody really knows why. There's no conclusive evidence. But a lot of people seem to think that the mine, or that the USS Maine was blown up by a Spanish mine that was under the water. Now again, there's no real evidence of this necessarily at the time, but with the yellow journalism and people being so upset and worried about what will happen to Cuba and our business interests, they pressure the president at the time, a guy named William McKinley, to go to war, and he does. He does go to war. The war itself goes really well. What we discover once we're at war with Spain is that their military is terrible. It's completely ill-prepared. It's completely ineffective. And we, as a country, are able to capture many Spanish colonies, the Philippines, Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, so many different colonies of Spain were able to capture. In fact, there's a lot of people in America are excited about this war. They want to serve, rich and poor alike, because they feel this is a great way for America to show how strong she is. Some of them are even include Teddy Roosevelt, a guy that will later become president, in a unit that he calls the Rough Riders. And this war is going on so well, and so many people are volunteering that the actual leading cause of death for American troops in this war is food poisoning and disease. It's not getting shot. That's not the thing that does it. It's not actually going to war that kills the most people in America in this war. Instead, it's the fact that we have terrible living conditions, right? I mean, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Cuba, these are really hot tropical climates. There's diseases everywhere, malaria, yellow fever. Mosquitoes carry these diseases. There's no refrigerators in these places. There's no electricity, no really advanced health care. So you get sick, there's a good chance you're not coming back. So, really, when we look at what our soldiers were dealing with, it's the living conditions, which are unsanitary and terrible, that really kills more Americans than anything else during the Spanish-American War of 1898. And now the war does go on for about a year, and we do end up signing a treaty. It's called the Treaty of Paris, and it does make us an international power. It makes us an empire. And really what you see then is, obviously we have the United States itself, but now we also have a nation far off in the Pacific called Guam. Used to be a Spanish colony, now it becomes an American territory. The former Spanish colony of Puerto Rico becomes part of America as a territory. Cuba, we actually say, will get its independence. But people really argue over what should we do with the biggest prize of all, the Philippines, because the Filipinos didn't want us there. They wanted to be free like Cuba. And an argument breaks out in the United States over what to do with Cuba, about whether or not we should annex or take over, the Philippines. Some people who are against it say that, look, this goes against what America's supposed to be about. America's supposed to be about freedom and democracy. These are our fundamental principles, right? And if we take the Philippines, we're going against those principles. And not to mention the fact that if we have all these new people as a colony working for American companies, it'll drive down wages for American workers. Other people really like this idea of taking over the Philippines. They want us to do it because they think it'll give us more ports in Asia, and it'll show us a world power, make us a world power. It'll be a way for us to really show the world that we're number one, and it'll be a new market to sell goods. Bottom line is, we end up taking the Philippines. We buy the island and its status as a colony for $20 million. Yeah. We bought the island and her people, right? You know what that's called when you buy people, right? That's called slavery, right? So we buy this island as a colony. Its people belong to us. We do give Cuba its independence, like we said we would, but we turn it into an American protectorate for the next 50-something years. It's called the Platt Amendment. We make them put this amendment, this addition to their Constitution that says that they're basically an American protectorate. Puerto Rico does become a territory of the United States. It's not an independent country. It does not get freedom. It's not a protectorate. It's a part of the United States. Today, some people want it to become a full state. Some people don't. But, all of this, while it does make us an empire, we can't overlook the fact that the Philippines rebel in a bloody war that goes on for like 40 years, where they don't want to be a part of the United States. They want to have full freedom. If you're going to take a step back and you wonder, is America an empire? Well, yeah, right? We have influence in Japan. We have a colony in the Philippines. We have another colony in Guam on the other side of the world. We have territories in Puerto Rico. We have a territory in Hawaii. We've got Cuba, a protectorate. Yeah, America's an empire. And we'll talk a little bit about this and these details more when we get together in class.